Getting your book onto the New York Times Bestsellers List is the gold standard for literary achievement. Allegedly. We get asked all the time by our authors how to hit the New York Times Bestseller List and a plethora of others. So today, we're going to talk about what it takes and if you even really want to. Before we start, there's something that you should know about bestseller lists. They're lies. So each bestseller list is different, but most of them will take a number of sales or try to curate sales in a finite window of time from a very limited number of places. Or in worst case scenarios, it's a handful of people who are deciding the list based on what they think is important and noteworthy. Disappointing, I know. We'll start with the New York Times Bestseller List because this is probably the most well-known and probably what you think of when you think of bestseller list. But since its inception in the 1930s, there's been criticism following the New York Times Bestseller List. This is focused around its small selected sample that it draws its numbers from. Specifically, there are a few problems that the New York Times Bestseller List can fall victim to. One of these is fast sales. So they look at a very short, finite window of time to pick out the best-selling books for their list. So this means that a book could sell really, really well in 1 week, while another book could sell steadily over several months and outsell this book, but the one who sells faster in a shorter period of time is going to hit the list. Another issue that could come up is double counting. So since the list looks at book sales and wholesalers, it's possible that a book sale could be counted twice, therefore skewing the numbers. Another problem can be manipulation of the numbers by publishers and authors. So this is as simple as an author or a publisher going and buying massive quantities of their own book to inflate sales. And also manipulation by retailers and wholesalers. So obviously, as we mentioned, getting your book on the New York Times bestseller list has the perception of a lot of clout. And so retailers and wholesalers know this. So by inflating their sales numbers that they're reporting to the Times, they basically make a book a bestseller before it even gets there. So the sales numbers that they will report will get the book on the list even before it makes it there. That might be some compelling evidence, but don't take my word for it. There is a ton of information online about how the Times list is curated and some of the problems with it. One interesting case to note is that in 1983, author William Blady sued the New York Times for about $6 million because his book Legion, which was later adapted to film as The Exorcist III, was not included on the New York Times list despite having really good sales numbers. The New York Times was able to win the lawsuit because they basically came out and said, this is not based on numeric evidence. This list is curated as an editorial piece, which means that it's kind of subject to our opinions and that it was safe under the Freedom of Speech Act. So again, this is public knowledge. You can look this up online, but this even further points to the fact that no matter what your sales are or your rankings, there's still a chance that you will not hit the bestsellers list. It's also very important to note that outside of romance and horror genres, they're not going to look at anyone who is not published by one of the big 5 publishers. Womp womp. Do not fear. There are a lot of ways to measure the success of your book that are outside of seeing it listed in a numerical order. So every book is different and every author is different. So you need to really be clear and honest with yourself about your goals for the specific book that you are publishing. And if you publish multiple books, it's always a good idea to go back to the drawing board for every one and set a very specific set of goals for each book. So you may be sitting at home like, I don't care what you say, I'm still going to be #1. And I would say, that's great. And that I really appreciate your determination, and you don't have to yell. But if you're still interested in getting on the bestseller list, here's a couple ways you can kind of stack the deck in your favor. So first up, pre-sales. So for the New York Times specifically, it's really important to get a large number of pre-sales if you are a new or relatively unknown author. So the number you're going to be looking for is about 10,000. The thing to keep in mind is that they're looking at the rate of sales in a specific time period. So what you want to think about is selling as many copies as you can in a short amount of time. So thinking about selling about 5,000 copies in a week is a good way to catch the eye of those bestseller lists. Be aware of where your books are selling. So you may have the most popping off stand at the farmer's market, but be sure that where you're selling your books, those are channels that are reporting to the list that you're trying to hit. So it's important to do your research and find out all of the reporting information you can for each specific list that you're looking at. Don't forget there are other lists out there. So take a look at the Wall Street Journal list. They're looking for about 3,500 to 5,000 sales to make their list. And they won't hold it against you if you're smart enough to forego the traditional publishing route. I know there's a little bit of doom and gloom in the beginning, but I want to end this by saying, if your goal is to make the bestseller list, don't let anyone tell you that it cannot be done. It's just important to research the list you're trying to get on and then map out the best way to get there. And I'm sure we'll see you on it soon. If you feel like you learned a lot about Bestsellers List, then be sure to hit subscribe and we'll see you next time.